Good morning, everybody. How we doing? Oh, what do we see there? Oh no, another person saying it's impossible to build a certain amount of muscle in a year, and yeah, these are people that, based off of their own experience, because they didn't gain a certain amount of muscle in their first year of lifting, thus it's impossible for everybody else, unless you're on steroids or some other PED or things like that. The problem is when you have new lifters that make claims like this, or people that don't research and use the most up to date scientific, it sounds kind of weird, the most up to date scientific principles in how you lift, how you eat, how you recover, and everything in between, intensity, protein intake, so on and so forth, is really kind of problematic. The thing is that you can gain a substantial amount of weight, but there's a ton of variables. I mean, there's the variables of are we talking about men or are we talking about women? Are we talking about their nutrition, protein intake, carb intake? Are we talking about intensity and how how much weight they're using? Are they operating and doing 50% of their one rep max, or are they pushing and going 70, 80, 85, 90%? There's a lot of things that come into play. Then there's the fact that most people that get into health and fitness, just say the average Jane and John Q public, go to the gym, get their 24-hour fitness or Planet Fitness thing, and then they go work out. They're not trained. They they don't know about long length partials. They don't know about intensity. They don't know about tempo and how you lift the weight to get the most hypertrophy that you can. Training for explosive power. They don't know what the number of sets and reps that you do for strength training versus hypertrophy. They don't know when you hit a plateau when you're doing hypertrophy, what do you do then? Well, you drop down to strength training. And then after you do that, then you go back into hypertrophy. Then the other thing is the majority of people go to the gym three days a week, maybe four. The people that do, and they're not they're not their goal is not to put on a lot of muscle. So their nutrition doesn't back it up. Their goals don't back it up. That's not what they're trying to achieve. And so they don't experience gaining a lot of muscle mass or fat-free muscle mass. And so when somebody comes along and says, well, you can gain X amount of weight and muscle mass in a year, and they're like, no, that's impossible. You can't do that. It's and considering that most people's goals is not to get a lot of hypertrophy, and their life isn't focused towards that endeavor, thus they come away with this, I don't know, this belief, I guess, which is the best thing to say, is they see everybody else around them doing the same thing that they are, and they don't see anybody getting really big, and so they say, well, it's impossible. The problem with that is, yeah, if you don't have the goals and you're not fueling your workouts, if you're not increasing your protein intake, and if you're not, more importantly, fueling your recovery, that's a thing that I find is prevalent in a lot of average gym goers and people, is that they don't understand. They think going to the gym and lifting weights is where you build muscle. That's not where you build muscle. That's where you do the stimulus to the muscle that creates micro muscle tears. And then during your recovery, that 24 to 48 hours in between your workouts of when you give rest to those muscle groups, your body sends out repair teams, repairs the damaged muscles, and also builds new muscle fibers to combat against that stimulus. So, yeah, there needs to be progressive overload. There's a lot of other things that come into play. So, for the average person, they don't know what they don't know, and it's kind of like taking somebody who just got their driver's license And then you have somebody who races in NASCAR. It's totally different. Yeah, you're still driving a car and there's still some basic principles that are the same, but there are so many advanced principles. There's so much more that goes into the details between somebody who just gets their license at 16 versus somebody who's a professional NASCAR driver or somebody who's a professional stunt driver or, rally car driver or whatever it is. So in that regard, how much can you realistically gain? Now, recently I was reading a post by a guy who said on a page, and let me see, it was over 50 page, and he ends up, the guy says that he gained like 10 pounds of muscle in a year. And then this other guy says, dude, no one gains 10 pounds of actual muscle in a year, at least not naturally. If you knew exactly how muscle was formed, micro muscle tears being repaired during rest time, that was impossible. Think of how many micro muscle tears would need to heal to gain 1 pound. 2 to 4 pounds a year is attainable, especially at only 1 hour a day. What this individual is saying is that it's impossible. You just can't do it. But already, this guy and what he is saying is flawed because your body, when it does repair those micromuscle tears, so it repairs the damaged ones, but it also builds more muscle fibers around that to combat against the stimulus. So in other words, he doesn't understand that your body builds new muscle fibers. It doesn't just repair the broken ones, it also builds new muscle fibers in reaction to stimulus. So yeah, it's very problematic when you have people that will make statements like this. And usually it stems because they can't make that muscle. They didn't make that muscle, so they think, and everybody around them, so they think that's impossible. The other problem comes from the people who are making these claims of saying, hey, I gained 10 or 20 pounds in my first year of lifting. And people will say, well, that's impossible. Nobody can put on 20 pounds of muscle in the first year. Well, again, let's backtrack and think about what is being said. If a person starts out and they weigh themselves on the scale and then they go work out 3 to 5 times a week, they lift and do their resistance training and they have a well-balanced nutrition plan, they've got good recovery, you can put on that amount of weight. So you can have a person that went from 200 to 220 pounds in a year, but is that 20 pounds of pure muscle? Is that fat-free muscle gain? Is that lean body muscle gain? Or is it more like, okay, there's a percentage of muscle gain, and then you also have water, you also have body fat, and so on and so forth. So, it can be very problematic because gaining weight is easy. You just eat more calories. You're into a surplus as you're shoving food down your pie hole. You go to the gym, you can gain some muscle, but then you'll also gain more body fat. And generally in the old school bulking type of thing, you see bodybuilders and people that lift in their off season and then they bulk up, they'll have a large amount of body fat. They don't have the six-pack abs, they don't have that there. It's they're big and it's kind of fun to do, but really when you get down to it, they didn't gain 20 pounds of pure muscle. They gained a percentage of muscle and then they also gained a percentage of body fat. So what this brings out, we need to keep this in mind, is because you'll see individuals say, oh, well, I gained 20 pounds. Well, how much of that was actual muscle mass? What is it, 50%, maybe 75%? It depends on how you look. Did you get a DEXA scan? What was your body fat content? Did you do fat calipers and the whole 9 yards? How did you determine that you gained a certain amount of muscle per year? So that's kind of something that people put out, and I gained, 15 pounds from working out in a year. Other people look and say, oh, that's impossible. And then the person also doesn't quantify and say, well, that 15 pounds or 20 pounds that I gained in the first year also includes body fat. So, we see misinformation on both sides being presented. But the question is, how much can you gain in a year? And like this individual said, 10 pounds of actual muscle in a year is not natural. Actually, if you look at studies and you can see articles and trainers and things, now we're talking about natural bodybuilding. We're not talking about PEDs and testosterone replacement and all that stuff. And actually, in my response, I said the average muscle gain per year can be substantial, all the way up to 25 pounds in the first year. But usually when you search for how much muscle can you gain in a year from resistance training, bodybuilding, whatever it is, you will see usually a range of like 8 to 15 pounds in the first year. In the second year of lifting, what you'll usually get is about half of what you got in the first year. And then, half in the third year, it's half of that. In the fourth year, it's half of the third, and so on and so forth. So naturally, it is not uncommon for people to gain 1 to 2 pounds of muscle a month in the first year. And that's just kind of the rule of thumb. There's a lot of things that come into play. There's genetics. Me, for example, I used to lift before. I get big quick. I can look at a dumbbell and I get big. But I don't get strong quick. I have a stepbrother who he works out like a fiend, and he takes mass gainers, the whole 9 yards, and he can't get big to save his life. He'll get a little bit of growth, but his thing is strength. His strength will go up through the roof, which is insane. He lifts more than me back when he was lifting. I don't know if he lifts now, but yeah, he would have massive strength gains, but he wouldn't have big size muscles like I do. And of course, we got different fathers. And my dad was, 6'4", 6'5", and German descent and kind of big. He was a big guy, and he had big frame, big muscles. His side of the family is big. So yeah, the genetics is a thing. And then there's the amount of time and energy that you put into that activity of reaching those goals. And it depends even if that's your goal at all. It's kind of unfair for somebody who says, I gained 20 pounds in my first year, and then the other person says, well, no, they look around at everybody else at Planet Fitness or 24-Hour Fitness or the gym that they're going to, the YMCA or whatever, and they don't see a lot of people gaining that much weight. Well, what are their goals? If a person's goal is not to specifically gain muscle and they don't have the nutrition to back up going towards that goal, they're not going to experience that amount of muscle gain. And usually for the majority of people, that's not their goal. Their goal is to exercise, to get in shape, have good heart health by doing cardio and so on and so forth. And they're not concerned with trying to pack on as much muscle as they can, whether it's naturally or supplemented with being not natty or whatever. So yeah, there's lots of articles that will show similar results, but there's a lot of things that come into play. For example, I tell people that I went from 210 pounds back, 50, and just over 3 years, I got up to 263 pounds. And people say, they'll do the math and they'll go, 53 pounds in 3 years, that's impossible. You can't gain that amount of muscle. Well, exactly. I totally agree. It is totally, you can't do that. And I didn't use any PEDs, but you have to realize I'm going off of total body weight. Total body weight. So that's skeletal mass, that's lean muscle mass, that's body fat, that's water content. When I weighed 263 pounds, I was eating 5,000, sometimes 6,000 calories a day. And I was drinking water like a fiend. And you could not see my abs. You could not see the definition. I was big, but that wasn't 53 pounds of muscle. So, you need to compare apples to apples. But yeah, it's my life and the goals at that time, because I have some nerve damage and part of my body, I've had several injuries and so on and so forth. So it was important for me to go and exercise and gain muscle to stave off things like sarcopenia and then injury-related muscle loss. So yeah, that's why I'm big on this. So yeah, it's really interesting, but people don't understand that amongst these variables, because they can't experience that same amount of lean muscle mass gains or even total muscle gains, they don't understand how to lift. They don't understand the strategies. They don't know the techniques and how to lift to get the most bang for your buck when it comes to hypertrophy. So in other words, if people come up, let me show you, hold on a second. So for example, we've got our trusty barbell here, and if what we end up doing is just kind of doing a curl and doing this, and you're cruising your phone and you're checking your text messages and all that stuff, you're not operating at a high percentage of your 1 rep max. And generally what we see with fitness organizations and hypertrophy studies and so on and so forth, for safe training, personal trainers usually recommend anywhere from 70 to 80 or 70 to 85% of your 1 rep max. That will produce good amounts of strength gains and muscle mass within that range. If you go higher, and if you do go higher than 85%, you'll experience the possibility or increased risk of being injured. So that's why personal trainers and fitness organizations and sports science specialists with PhDs and all this stuff, all the gurus who do studies and, on PubMed and so on and so forth, recommend, hey, this is the safe area where you can still get strength gains, you can still get muscle mass, hypertrophy, and do so in a safe manner without overtraining. So that's the other thing. It comes into overtraining, and that's dependent on the lifter. But like when doing the bicep curl, as you come up, using the amount of weight of doing reps to failure. So doing reps to failure is important. And so, for example, I will do, for hypertrophy, studies show that anywhere from 3 to 5 sets per muscle group is optimal for hypertrophy. Anywhere from 6 to 12 repetitions is the optimal range for hypertrophy. Now you can build muscle if you go to like 15 reps or so, but again, we're looking at studies that talk about hypertrophy and they talk about reps to failure. So if I do 15 repetitions like this, and it's like, okay, no big deal, and it's not reps to failure within that 70 to 80% of the 1 rep max, I'm not going to experience as much muscle gain as I could as if I used a heavier weight, and to where I actually got up to that 15th rep and I'm done. There is a huge difference between those two ways of lifting. Now, the other thing we see is that how much of a return you're getting on hypertrophy during the actions of the repetition. So in other words, you have the action of shortening the muscle, shortening your bicep and bringing it up to this position, and then you have the lengthening of letting it go down. You can get hypertrophy from bringing the weight up, but studies have shown that having a slower negative on the way down with about 4 to 6 seconds, you're going to get more hypertrophy than just going up and then letting the weight drop, going up and going down fast. You're leaving gains on the table, so to speak. So there's something to be said for the techniques of how you lift. And now, kind of the whole purpose of this video is that people have asked me, how much can I expect to gain? What blah, blah, blah. What techniques to use when lifting for hypertrophy and so on and so forth. So since I read this thing of guys saying it's impossible to put on 10 pounds of muscle in a year, combined with all of these variables and how to do the exercise, I thought this would make a real good video to share with everybody. It doesn't matter if you're young or old. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or whatever. These principles can apply. And what's really good about this is that these are good for hypertrophy, but it's also good for maintaining a physique that you currently have and say, okay, well, I like where I'm at. That's all I want to do. you can still use all these techniques to maintain a physique that you have, and that's going to be balanced out by the amount of calories that you eat. For example, a lot of women will say, hey, I don't want to get big. I don't want to get bulky. I don't want to. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Most women, the majority of women, want to be in shape. They want to be toned. They don't want to be, muscle bound and all of that. Totally get it. There's a lot of men that are like that as well. And that's totally fine. What you need to realize, though, is that when you use these techniques, you get the most efficient workout in regards to hypertrophy. And if you go down into the strength range of sets and reps, you can use these same techniques to increase your strength. You can use these same techniques to maintain as long as your caloric intake is the same in a maintenance phase. So, you'll have some crazy, stupid people that will claim, oh, you can't use those because, I don't want to get too big. And most people don't want to get huge. And it's like, if you do these exercises in the way that you lift the weights, it's not going to blow you up into the Hulk. Because first of all, you don't have the caloric intake or the protein intake to support that. So if I don't eat a lot of calories and I'm eating at a maintenance phase, I will just continue maintaining the physique that I have while still using these techniques. I can use it for I can use it for fat loss, body fat loss. I can do a routine and I go into a calorie deficit. I'm not going to grow the muscle. The muscles are going to stay the same, but I'm retaining the lean muscle mass and I'm trying to drop body fat through nutrition. Yeah, so this whole thing, if anybody tells you, you don't want to do that because, that'll put on too much muscle and nobody wants to be like you and have massive arms and it's like that's not how the body works. So that's flawed thinking right there. That just shows somebody's really, really ignorant. Kind of like the people that say, you can't put on 10 pounds of muscle a year. The other part of this is those people won't study. They won't look at research that's done on hypertrophy, and they won't look at the average returns that people get by using these type of techniques. And to think that, if you use a technique, you're just going to keep blowing up and up and up and up in muscle mass is ridiculous if you don't have enough calories and protein. It's kind of like saying, you're going to build a house, and it's just going to be so huge if you keep using those techniques. And nobody wants that. Well, you can have somebody that builds a house, a brick house, and they can build a 10,000 square foot house by building bricks, by using bricks. But they have to have the bricks. Protein are the bricks. So if you don't have the protein in your nutrition plan, your body's not going to override and say, well, I'm going to make muscles out of nothing. Just based off of these techniques, it's never-ending muscle for everybody. It's not how the body works. So yeah, it's really, when you see somebody make that claim, it's really stupid. It is monumentally stupid because it shows that they don't know how the body responds to resistance training, whether you're in a surplus of calories and protein or in a maintenance phase or in a deficit phase. Prime example is me. I eat a lot of protein. Anywhere from 0.7 grams per pound of body weight to 1 gram per pound of body weight. And that kind of fluctuates. It depends on my goals. But usually, like when I'm trying to put on muscle, I'll have about 1 gram per pound of body weight. So, we're looking at 250 grams of protein a day. Other times I'll drop it down to about 200 a day, depending on my goals and whether I'm trying to cut and see more abs or whatever. So there's me. My goals are different than my wife's goals. My wife is 5'3", she weighs $110, and she uses the exact same principles that I have taught her that actually have been taught to me through research studies and science-based evidence. And she is toned up, she's lost body fat because that was her goal, and so her nutrition plan was centered around that goal. So she doesn't have this problem of runaway muscle and gaining and looking like the Incredible She-Hulk because she uses these things that science-based evidence shows. So when people say things like that, these monumentally stupid things, it means they don't understand how the body works, and most likely they're trying to sell something. Okay, there's a whole thing on that, but I won't get into it. So the other thing that we need to look at is the reason why most people don't gain a lot of muscle mass in their first year is because they don't know about all the different variables. One variable being intensity, working within that 70 to 80% or 85% of your 1 rep max. Doing reps to failure. So in other words, you can do a set, and if you're doing 12 repetitions and you're getting, and it's like 12, you know, that is reps to failure. Maybe leaving 1 or 2 in the tank. Most people don't do that. Most new people that go to the gym and get in shape and, you know, they make that decision to get healthy for, you know, longevity and so on and so forth, which is absolutely awesome. Warriors, that is incredible. But they don't know how to lift, and they don't bring that intensity because they don't know how much intensity they should use. The other thing that comes into play is the tempo of the repetition. Like we were saying, the return on your money. If I do a barbell curl or dumbbell curl like this and I go down quick, I'm not getting a good return on my investment in regards to hypertrophy or strength, depending on how you train, because you're letting the weight go down. If you control the weight in a slow manner, so in other words, if I go up in 1 second and then I go down in 4 to 6 seconds, that puts more strain and stimulus on those muscle fibers, I'm going to get more hypertrophy. And matter of fact, there was a study that, and I'm trying to find it, it was a long time ago, but there's actually a study that did just negatives. Somebody else lifts the weight up and you just do negatives, and that produces a lot of hypertrophy. So if your goal is to build muscle, if you're a senior that is looking to gain muscle and combat against sarcopenia that is in all of our future, well, actually about 30% of people will experience sarcopenia, but losing muscle mass or staving that off or even reversing that is possible through resistance weight training by doing slow negatives. Now, the interesting thing is in America, we usually assume more is better, you know, in pretty much everything we do. However, there's a problem with that. It's not scientifically proven, okay? More is not always better. And so when we're talking about hypertrophy, we're talking about trying to get the maximum amount of muscle growth that we can, but where does that start to diminish in regards to the length or the duration of a repetition? And through studying a lot of stuff, what researchers have found through doing repetitions is you come up in 1 to 2 seconds, you go down in 4 to 6 seconds, so you're about 8 to 10 seconds. But what researchers have found is if you do a repetition where the duration hits 10 seconds or longer, it no longer is focused on hypertrophy. There's a diminishing return of hypertrophy, and now we're getting into the endurance of the muscle, which is absolutely fine. If you want to train for endurance, then go for it. That's your goal, then congratulations. Do extremely long, I don't know why you would really do those things. It doesn't provide any additional strength gains. It doesn't provide any additional hypertrophy because studies show that there's a diminishing return on hypertrophy when you go past 10 seconds. So 10 seconds or less for your reps for hypertrophy and strength is good. Anything longer is going to go into endurance. So I'm not really sure. Maybe if it's just your thing and you like doing isometric type of exercises, or you just like holding a weight like this for, 20, 30 seconds or whatever it is. But again, with a weight like this, I could hold this and am I really operating at 70 to 85% of my 1 rep max? No, obviously not. So the uneducated and the monumentally stupid people will make some wild claims in regards to, oh, do this, and this is what I found what works. It's not working as much as you claim, according to studies that have controlled groups and double blind and the whole 9 yards. The tempo is very important. Now, if you really want to kickstart your hypertrophy. And I wish I knew this early on, because this would have saved me so much time. I would have got so much better results when I was younger. But what you end up doing is taking like 1 second to come up. And then when you get to this peak position, squeeze that bicep or that muscle group, and then hold it for 1 to 2 seconds, and then do that slow 4 to 6 second negative. And then go ahead, keep the tension on the muscle. Just don't relax, because then, you're getting some loss of tension. Always leave a little bit of tension on that muscle when you get down to the lowered position. That's important as well. And then again, repeat, go up 1 to 2 seconds up, 1 to 2 seconds, really squeeze that bicep, and then do a slow 4 to 6 second negative. That will be a killer. And you're not going to be able to do as much weight. So a lot of ego lifting is left behind when you do this, but you still want to operate within that 70 to 85% of your 1 rep max. If you want to jumpstart your hypertrophy and training even more, now we're going to talk about long length partials, which is awesome. If you're trying to gain muscle in weak areas, say your biceps or your chest, I used to have some problems with my upper chest, but now I don't. By using this tempo of 1 second up, 1 to 2 seconds of contraction at the peak, and then 4 to 6 seconds for that slow negative return, and then combine long length partials at the end after you've hit that reps to failure, yeah, you're gonna feel it. So in other words, after I will do 3 to 5 sets per body part, depending on what it is. And I'll do 6 to 12 repetitions. And usually I'll start out with 12 repetitions for the first set, 10 for the second, 8 for the third, and 6 for the fourth. And again, operating at that 70 to 85%, sometimes more, to where that last one, I got that 8th one in, and then I go ahead and let it down. And it's like, and I do that, and then I'm done. And then what I'll do is long length partials, which goes along with weighted stretching in a study that I read. Long length partials, there's a number of studies, and Jeff Nippard highlighted a lot of these studies in a video that he did. So look up long length partials with Jeff Nippard. He does it way more justice than I do, but I had found those same studies. So when you get down to this position, then do kind of like a half partial that focuses on the stretched position. So as that muscle is stretched, just do those half partials and going into that stretched position. Use heavier weight. You can do that half partial for that stretched position, that first beginning part of the repetition when it comes to a bicep curl. If you're doing like flies, then it would be in this position here where you come up and maybe into that position, and then you really just stop there, stretching out, or even incline press where you're really stretched out here, and then you just go up to this position here and then back down. Long length partials, combined with that tempo that I mentioned, you will get some results. Granted, your nutrition comes into play. So yeah, it's pretty intense. It is pretty intense. And like I said, I've been using these things for quite some time to fill in the areas of where I'm weak, like my upper chest. And if you're looking for muscle gain, can you see how much more hypertrophy that you can get by using these techniques than instead of just doing this? Or instead of just holding the weight, or you're doing cables and you're holding the weight here for 20, 30 seconds, and then you bring it in a little bit, 20, 30 seconds or whatever. That's more like a slow-moving sloth isometric exercise with cables that has no basis in hypertrophy, according to studies. So, excuse me. So anyway, can you imagine how much you can gain and how more efficiently you can gain muscles and strength? Because again, it depends on how and what your goals are. If I'm going for strength, I'm going for 3 to 5 sets. but I'm going to be working at a lower rep range because I'm working on strength. So, maybe what, three to six reps, 4 to 6, 4 to 7 reps, somewhere around that range. You can Google it and you will find a number of studies that will show the optimal number of sets for strength gains. Or if you're doing power, which is really, you're looking at, 1 or 2 reps. That powerlifting thing is a whole different animal, because powerlifting, you're going to have extremely long rest periods between your sets. Like I was reading some articles on powerlifters, and they'll do 3 to 5 minute rest periods between sets, sometimes longer. That is huge. When it comes to strength training, you can get really intense, and again, there are some longer rest periods that are needed to allow your central nervous system to reset, to get refreshed, and put more intensity into the following workouts. Or generally, the most average gym goer will go to the gym, they'll lift, they've heard, oh, well, I do, my rest periods are, between 30 seconds to 90 seconds or 60 seconds, and then I do my next set. So in other words, they're going bam, 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 with about 30 to 60 seconds between sets, which is absolutely fine, but they don't know about these other things. And so when they come to a place and they look at their life and they look at everybody else around them that is similar to them, and they see, well, I couldn't put on 10 pounds, so hence it's impossible unless you're juiced to the gills or whatever it is. If they don't know these science-based techniques, of course they're going to come to that conclusion. If that is their only experience, and they don't know how to use these things, or they don't know how to be in a surplus, they don't know that you need to have an increased protein intake, of course they're going to get substandard results. So when you get somebody who gets standard results by incorporating all these things with nutrition and recovery and so on and so forth, they think that's impossible. Well, to a baby, it's impossible to run the Boston Marathon. For a little kid, it's impossible to do a lot of things as adults because we have knowledge and experience in all of those things. The good thing is we can take this research and we can apply it to our lives and minimize that learning curve and make our workouts more efficient. We can make them more productive in regards to hypertrophy and strength. And, whether you're trying to be like me, which I wouldn't recommend, it's just my own personal goals. If you're trying to get hypertrophy gains, or whether you're trying to maintain a physique, or whether you're trying to cut and lose body fat, my wife, she lost like 10, 15 pounds by using these same principles. We do the same workout. She's my training partner, but she's 5'2" and or 5'3", and she's, let me see if I can find the picture, because it's so awesome. There we are. She's so awesome. Check that out. Now, this was a little while ago, but that's a wife, and you can see she's got some good definition. She got some biceps. And this is an older picture too. She's got more definition. She's just killing it, rocking it. She's got some shoulders coming in. So yeah, it's just not, these techniques and strategies and tempo and all of these things are not meant just for people who are trying to get big. If you're trying to lose body fat, that's a caloric deficit thing. You still got to have a workout program, and you still want an efficient means in which to exercise the full range of motion, but you also want to exercise for strength, mobility, functional fitness, and so on and so forth. There are some people that say, you should only do negatives, force negatives, and that's all you need for hypertrophy. No, I think you need to do full range of motion, because that comes into the functional fitness realm of just being a human being, of being a person and reaching and moving and lifting things up and squatting and, things that you'll need as you get older. But yeah, these techniques can be used by everyone, regardless of their goals, but it's just going to allow you to meet your goals in a more efficient manner. If I just lift the weight up and then let it go down, and I don't use that tempo that I just talked about, you're going to lose some muscle building, muscle burning, or fat burning capabilities, because you're going to use calories to work that muscle. You're going to use some carbs and so on and so forth. But if you're in a deficit, your body's going to use that stored fat. So using the most efficient and effective means of working out by using the tempo that I mentioned, it will help jumpstart and minimize the amount of time it takes to lose body fat. Maintain your physique is the exact same thing. You can maintain the physique that you're at, and that's going to be guided by how many calories that you take in. But if it's a maintenance phase, you can continue using these techniques here to maintain the physique that you have. If you're trying to gain, a lot of muscle, use these, boom, up your protein, be in that surplus, and you will get results. There's a number of things, again, going back to the individual who said that it's impossible to gain 10 pounds of muscles in a year. There's a number of studies that show that you can, and or articles showing that you can. Let me see if I get this in frame. Here's an article. Men can expect to build 35 to 45 pounds of muscle over their lifetime, 20 to 25 pounds for women. It goes on further, about 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per month. And then the rate of muscle growth will slow over your fitness journey. So this is kind of important, because in your years of proper training, that's the key, is proper training. If you don't know these techniques and strategies of how to lift, tempo, intensity, and so on and so forth, you're not going to get this type of return on investment when it comes to hypertrophy. For men, you can get anywhere from 20 to 25. Now, this is kind of on the high end. Usually what I see is about 8 to 15 pounds, but about 2 pounds, around 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per month. Women, you'll get about 10 to 12. And then you'll notice that on the second year, you'll get basically half of what you got the first year. But it's all dependent upon proper training. If you don't have good training techniques and you're leaving gains, whether it's strength gains or hypertrophy gains, on the table because you don't know how to lift, you're obviously not going to reach that potential. It's just kind of how the world works, that cause and effect relationship. This muscle and strength article in 2020, how much muscle can you actually gain? And here it talks about, where is it at? This guy who's a fitness trainer and whatever, what is he? Yeah, fitness trainer, sports scientist guy. And he trains clients, and muscle gain in his case. A 2019 review of scientific literature suggested a weekly weight gain target for natural bodybuilders. Their recommendations were 0.25 to 0.5% per week for beginners, and a slightly slower approach for advanced bodybuilders. So a beginner, up to 2 years of good training, about 0.25, 0.5% per week. Intermediate, in other words, and this is with good training. So let me just show you this, because this will make more sense. So when we're looking at this, again, we're looking at 0.25 to 0.5%, 0.5%. Between years 2 and 4 of consistent training, you're looking at 0.25, and then more advanced, you're looking at 0.2% of body weight per month. So yeah, there's a diminishing return on how much you can gain. And for those of you who want to know the name of the article, How Much Muscle You Can Actually Gain, written by Tom McCormick in October 2020, all those things need to come into play. There's another article, this was in the UK, Independent, How Much Muscle Can You Gain in a Month According to Experts. This was actually published in January of 2023, and where is it? This guy, Mark Jacobczyk, personal trainer, pretty smart. He's got some good, reliable information. He said, well, all those things considered, an average man can gain about 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per month. The average woman, up to 1 pound per month. So yeah, and it all depends on the amount of stimulus. The volume comes into play as well. So if you have somebody who tries to make claims that, oh, you can do this in minimal amount of time, you don't have to spend time in the gym, and no, it doesn't have to be really intense. And their definition of intense is not in accordance with studies. That's another thing to take into consideration. You'll have some people that will also say, oh, well, you can be age strong, as kind of a buzzword or thing. What does age strong mean? I mean, you have people that are in their 60s and 70s that are doing powerlifting competitions that are rocking record numbers. And so are they strong for their age, or is that the potential for everybody? Well, obviously everybody has the potential, but there's a lot of variables involved, and the biggest one being if that's what you want to do. But this term age strong just, it doesn't, it's too malleable. It's like, well, you can be strong at any age. Well, yeah, no shit. But what do you really mean? I mean, it just seems like a buzzword or a phrase that, oh, you can be age strong, and if you do this program or routine or whatever it is, it's like, well, anybody does resistance weight training, you could be strong at the age that you're at. Is there some metric that you are setting forth and saying, well, age strong, when you reach this, you become age strong? Absolutely not. It's just kind of a buzzword phrase that people are using to say, oh, well, as you start exercising, you can become age strong. It's just kind of like it's hype, it's clickbait, it makes people feel good, which there is a place for positive reinforcement, but when you're just blowing smoke up somebody's ass by some nonsensical, there's no substance to it or scale of which to say, okay, here you're age strong, here you're not. It's all dependent on the person, the individuals, the goals, the capabilities, the injuries or that they have. What are we looking at here? It's just a nonsensical phrase that has no meaning because it's so relative, it's so subjective to, it's kind of like, oh, you're smart, be age smart. What does that mean? It doesn't, there's no substance to it. There's no standards, there's no set rules or guidelines or standards of which you're trying to attain or goals. As opposed to science-based training, what you see is, hey, if you're looking for hypertrophy, if you're looking for strength, and how much strength gains can you get in a 6-month cycle or 8 to 12 weeks or, within a year, what are we looking at? It's very defined. There's data driven. There's very specific on what they are looking for and what they found that works. So when I find people that say, oh, it's impossible, or, on the other side of the spectrum, oh, if you do this, you'll get this, but they don't have the data and the science facts to back it up. And you look at their programs and what they're doing of that individual or the program that they're selling and hyping, and it doesn't jive with what we see generally when it comes to hypertrophy or strength training. Yeah, you need to be careful with that. But the good news is that if you go to the gym and you lift 3 to 5 days a week, you do 75 minutes to 150 minutes of cardio a week, you're going to be in generally better health and have a well-balanced diet. You will be in better health than the majority of Americans, hands down. But you can take it as far as you want it. You can use these techniques to get the most bang for your buck when it comes to hypertrophy or strength or a combination of the two. You can bounce back between the two. You can use these techniques for maintaining muscle mass. And if you hit the physique and say, hey, I like where I'm at, I don't want to get any bigger, I don't want to get any smaller, you can still use these same techniques to maintain what you have. If you want to lose body fat, you can use these exact same techniques, the tempo, the whole 9 yards that we talked about, to be able to lose body fat. So that variable of energy that you need to complete these exercises and get the most bang for your buck, that will jumpstart and keep your fat loss journey. As long as your nutritional deficit is on point, you will lose fat faster than if you're just doing an exercise where you lift it up and you don't really care about the 4 to 6 second slow negative. Where you lift it up, you don't do the contraction or do the flow 4 to 6 second negative. If you're just kind of doing it, you're not burning as much, so you're not going to lose as much body fat as you could than when you were using these techniques. So yeah, it is and we're plagued by what we don't know. So yeah, I just wanted to bring this out, and I thought that was really interesting on how that person thought that, you know, it's impossible for somebody to gain 10 pounds, or 15 pounds. No, it really just depends on the variables, and it depends on, what you incorporate, your nutrition, your recovery, and so on and so forth, your recovery times between workouts. There's some people that look at what I do in a routine that I'm doing now that say, oh, you can't do that, you're overtraining. No, I'm not overtraining because I'm an experienced lifter. And you also have to take that into consideration. So for new people, what I recommend is, here's the routine. I suggest doing 24 to 48 hours between your workouts. And so that way, that gives you more than enough recovery time. And then again, people have lives. And if somebody's life is busy with work and family and commitments and other things, just life in general, and they can only get to the gym 3 days a week, there's a routine for that. And having 1 or 2 days between your workout schedule is absolutely fine. And again, I'm not talking about trying to be Mr. Olympia. I'm not trying to make people look like me or look like my wife. It's whatever goals you have, you can attain those. But realize there is a relationship to how much time you spend doing something and the amount of return that you're going to get. If somebody promises and says that you can spend minimal amount of time but get such huge results, yeah, that's a red flag. So I guess what I'm saying is be realistic in your expectations. If you don't want to put the time and energy into a subject and then you don't reach these hyper realistic, these unrealistic expectations, you're going to get frustrated and you're going to come to the conclusion, no, you can't gain 10 pounds. That's impossible. Well, does your nutrition back it up? Does your time and energy that you spend in that activity, is that, are these things leveling out? Or are you putting this much time and effort, but you want these results? There's a huge void, a huge deficit. So no wonder you're not getting the same results. You get a lot of people. Recently, I had a guy contact me, and he says, "Oh, I just can't." He's been lifting for a couple of years, and it ends up he's just plateaued. But he's training every single day. He's not giving, and it's not a bro split where you get rest between muscle groups. You can work a different muscle group every day. He's like doing the same muscle groups, and it's like, you are obviously overtraining. So you know how to train, but you're just overtraining and you're not giving yourself good recovery. So yeah, there's times where we need to ratchet back, and even though we can do things, doesn't mean that we should. We need to understand how the body works for stimulus, for recovery, for building. And all that comes into play. And it comes with time and education. And unfortunately, there's a lot of uneducated people who come into health and fitness. I was one of them at one time, so I'm putting myself in that category. But what I found that helps the most is by reading published studies, looking at meta-analysis, and finding what works the most efficient ways for strength, hypertrophy, power, whatever it is. I can use these things to my advantage to streamline my routine and my wife's routine and the routine I give to other people so that they can reach their goals. Now, here's the cool thing. I just want to end with this. I've had people contact me and say, hey, well, I don't want to lift a lot of free weights. That's another thing. I don't use a lot of free weights. I use a lot of plate machines, hammer strength machines. I don't do bench anymore. I haven't done bench. I think the last time I did bench was 53, 52, 53, something. Yeah, 53, I think was the last time I was doing bench, barbell bench. And I'm 57 now. I just use machines. And of course, imagine that. The reason I did that is because a number of studies came out showing that the amount of hypertrophy and strength gains can be had is similar to free weights as with machines. So, yeah. But then people will say, well, I don't want to use free weights. Okay, I want to use bands, or I want to use, kettlebells or whatever. That's absolutely fine. Use these same principles. If you're using those heavy resistance bands and you're doing, laying on the floor and have the resistance bands and you're pushing up and doing that, Use the same tempo, 1 to 2 seconds up, squeeze and really get that tricep in there and do that slow 4 to 6 second slow negative, and then do, like 5 partials in that really stretched position. The exact same thing can be done with resistance bands. Same thing can be done with kettlebells. Same thing can be done with dumbbells or machines or whatever it is. Even body weight exercises. Because a push-up is really what? Just a bench press, but you're laying flat forward. That's all it is. You're just slipping your position. You're still exercising your chest. So to get more of a stretch when you're doing body weight exercises, to get more of that stretch and to get more of that muscle activation, have it a little bit further out. Again, have your arms about a 45 degree, and then you do your push-ups. And then as you go down, then do your partials, just do halves, five at the end. Of course, you're going to be doing reps to max, so you're going to be able to do more push-ups because you don't have additional weight to push. But all of these techniques can be used to jumpstart and have a more efficient workout, whether you're doing body weight exercises, bands, kettlebells, whatever, machines, free weights, dumbbells, or a combination of thereof. It's just a more efficient and effective way, according to the research that has been done. And if people knew this, then they wouldn't fall for the BS of people that are just saying, well, I didn't experience it, so it must be impossible. There's a lot of things that you haven't experienced, doesn't mean that it's impossible. You can't fly a plane. You've never undertaken the education or taken the practice of flying a plane. So in a sense, you're saying that it's impossible for everybody to fly a plane. No, that's not the case. There's education and experience that comes into play. And that's the magic of these studies. That's the magic of the research in sports science. It's just amazing. I just really, really get into it. So, but then again, I'm retired and I put way more time into health, fitness, and nutrition than probably the majority of people. But that's my own personal thing. That's totally fine. If somebody only has, an hour for a workout 3 to 4 days a week, you can maximize that workout by using the science-based evidence and facts instead of just leaving the gains at the table. And being less efficient. Who wants to be less efficient? Especially as seniors, we're behind the power curve if we're just getting into health and fitness and exercise and we're trying to gain some muscle to stave off sarcopenia. We want our better life in our golden years as we retire. I'm retired. And yeah, why not take the most efficient means to get strength and hypertrophy and for maintenance and or body fat loss, use science-based evidence. Don't go for the 90 days to ripped abs, or the what is that V-shred, BS. That guy is so close, but he sounds like or Hera. That's another fitness influencer, and there's a plethora of influencers and online trainers that are just full of BS. Now, there's a lot of great online trainers who have some very valuable information because they take studies, they take their training seriously, and they base their routines and their techniques on things that have actually proven to work in studies. So yeah, it's just like with anything else. You've got the few bad apples, and then the majority of people are pretty good. But it's the few bad apples that are taking advantage of people that really kind of pisses me off. Or, the few bad apples that are ignorant, have drawn their own conclusions, not based on anything factual whatsoever, and making some wild ass claims or saying that, oh, you can't do that, you can't do this. See the difference? It's huge. So anyway, yeah, try that tempo when you're working out. Operate within 70 to 85% of your 1 rep max, and you will jumpstart your gains, strength, hypertrophy, fat loss, whatever it is. So yeah, that's what we got going on. And it's funny, this is the last thing. I swear to God, this is the last thing. I got people that contact me who want my routine. And I've given my routine out. But for new people, what I'll do is, it's like, well, what equipment do you have available? Well, I only have this, and this. Well, then a bench press is a bench press. Dumbbell bench press is still a bench press. Machine bench press is still a bench press. Cable bench press is still a bench press. Band, you see what I'm saying? There's certain exercises that are going to be the same across the board, regardless of the equipment that you have. Progressive overload also comes into play, but, and so you're limited with body weight exercises. So eventually you just kind of go into the realm of going from hypertrophy and strength into endurance and things like that. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can use an exercise program. So really a bench press is a bench press is a bench press. And, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, the body is going to respond the same, albeit with less hypertrophy and strength results for women than for men, generally across the board because of genetics and testosterone and things like that. But there is no, this workout is good for men, and that workout is bad for women because it's for men, or it's because I'm doing it. The workout, the body doesn't know that the stimulus that you're putting onto the muscles in your skeletal system has been designed for a woman. It doesn't know that, it doesn't differentiate that, this is a routine that was made for a man or made by a man. So we can't respond, and the body's not going. See how stupid that is? Like I said, my wife does the exact same routine I do, albeit with different amounts of weight. But yeah, she's rocking it and killing it too. So use what works. It just depends on how well you claim that it works versus how it actually works. And really, we need to be honest. If you're going to invest time and energy in something, do you want something that just works, or you want something that's more efficient and more effective? Yeah, I want the more efficient and more effective. So, and then the last thing I will say, that people will look at me and they'll say, blah, 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 blah. And you're just trying to steal clients from somebody. I get that a lot. And I don't understand why, because I don't take money for training people. I have no dog in the hunt other than facts, words matter, truth matters, evidence-based, techniques work. And obviously other things don't. So I want people to get the most bang for their buck, and I'm giving the information freely. I don't sell my services. I'm not trying to corner or steal anybody's clientele or whatever, because I don't charge people. I'm giving you all of this information for free. You can look up a number of posts that I've done in the past in regards to hypertrophy and strength training and so on and so forth. I give all of that away for free, just like I've done here. I've had people approach me that are personal trainers. They're like, how did you get to the condition that you're in? And it's like, well, here's what I do for, why are you doing such a slow negative, 4 to 6 seconds? Or why are you doing at the end of this partial thing that you're doing? And I explain it to them. And these are people that have been personal trainers for 5, 10 years that don't know this information. It's not their fault. It's just that the organization that they got their certification is doesn't keep up with the new advancements and discoveries that come with, sports science. And it's just not knowing. So yeah, it's ever evolving, it's ever growing. We're discovering more facts than we have in the past because more people are testing these things. It's all right. I'm rambling enough. Anyway, I gotta slam some food down because today is arm day. We're gonna be killing the arm day. So anyway, if you got any questions, put them in the comment section down below. I'll try to get to them as I can, but I have a life even though I'm retired. I'll try. But you've got some great information in this video. Put it to use and you can kill it, warriors. All right? We'll see you on the next one. Peace.